All right, guys, we've got ourselves another preview here for the NFL season. This time, the Los Angeles Chargers. We're going to do our normal thing. We're going to go through the roster, the schedule, the changes, the predictions, all that fun stuff. And yeah, so why don't we go ahead and jump on into it? We'll start with what happened last year. Interesting year for this Chargers team. They do win 11 games, and they do so with, you know, some issues happening. Again, Herbert wasn't playing super well throughout the year. The injuries on the offensive line made the offensive line practically untenable. I believe Herbert had 20 more pressures than the nearest quarterback. So the offensive line was obviously a gigantic issue. And despite all that, despite the issues on the offense there, this team again won 11 games and got to the playoffs, and that's where everything kind of fell apart. The defense was good, held New England pretty low. The offense, again, the offensive line, just a sieve. Herbert, again, dealing with, that hand still. He didn't play particularly well during the back portion there. He was missing throws and things in that playoff game. I don't want it to... I really like Justin Herbert, and we're going to talk about him a lot more down the line, but he was missing throws in that game on top of, the constant pressures and sacks and all that fun stuff. So, again, he didn't play particularly well. He finished the year 20th in EPA through 13 picks. And this kind of rung in a few changes, particularly on the offense as Mike McDaniel comes in, and that should be an upgrade. I really like Mike McDaniel, and we'll talk about him later as well, but I think that's an upgrade. They do lose Jesse Minter to the Ravens, and they bring in Chris O'Leary, who was kind of in that system a little bit. And if you listen to some others, there seems to be, that thought train that while he was there, before he moved on to the college game for a year, that thought was, hey, new defensive coordinator here, go get some experience running a defense, doesn't matter where, and then we'll come back. And that's looks like what's happened with Chris O'Leary here. So we'll see if he can step in. I don't know if he's going to be better or worse than Jesse Minter. Jesse Minter was a really good defensive coordinator, so probably a slight drop on the defense in terms of a play calling and coordinating standpoint, but an upgrade on the offense. And again, we'll see how that plays out. Jim Harbaugh still there, who we very much like, a very good coach. And yeah, so it didn't end how the Chargers would have wanted, but I thought the season itself, again, winning 11 games in those conditions is difficult, and I thought they did that. But all in all, probably a bit of a letdown the way they went out, and the way the team, the offense kind of fell apart as the season went on. So a couple changes there. Again, last year defense was good, 6th in total defensive EPA, 4th against the run, 8th against the pass. Offense was different, 25th in total offense, 25th in pass offense, 19th in rush offense. So if we can get that offense moving on up and the defense can kind of just stay stagnant in that spot, you're looking at a pretty good football team. But we do have to get there, and we have to, see if we can get there. So a couple players out the door, a couple decent ones here. Zion Johnson's gone, Mekhi Becton gone, a couple linemen there. Benjamin St-Juste, who had a really fantastic year last year, gone. Keenan Allen gone. Odafe Owe, who had a pretty good year after he showed up from Baltimore, so that's a bit of a loss. Ogbonnia on the interior, Deshaun Hand, some depth there. Tyler Conklin gone, Jamari Sailor at right guard gone. They bring in a couple of decent players that I like. Tyler Baidash at center. We'll talk about him in a minute. Charlie Kolar at tight end. Cole Strange at guard. Dalvin Tomlinson, who had a good year last year, out of Arizona on the interior. Keaton Mitchell, who I think is talented, hasn't really gotten that push anywhere yet, but I think he's talented, so we'll see. They paid him a little bit, so I imagine he'll get some work this year as we go along. Alec Ingold at fullback. Again, we're talking about the return of the fullback and the way things are going. And then Coyote Owasika and on the offensive line. And then, of course, in the draft, Akeem Mesidor at edge, Jake Slaughter at center, Brendan Thompson, wide receiver, Travis Burke, offensive tackle, Genesis Smith at safety, Nick Barnett at defensive tackle, Logan Taylor at guard, and Alex Harkey at guard. Yeah, we're going to talk about some of these in a bit, but there aren't a ton of difference makers here, I don't think, in terms of just the free agent class they bought in. We're hoping to get some difference makers out of the draft, and, it's set up so that a few of these guys are going to be pretty heavily involved early. But in terms of the free agency class, it wasn't, blown away or anything like that. But hopefully we can get some decent contributors there. Let's start with the roster. Let's go into the roster like we always do, and we'll start with quarterback like we always do. Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert is always the topic of conversation. I think people who watch him week in and week out see the talent and see, some of the other negative things happening to him and kind of brush off some of the negatives and stuff like that. I think he's a very good quarterback. He is my 9th ranked quarterback in the league. But for those conversations to stop, he has to, win some playoff games and do some stuff like that, and play a little bit better. But also, again, last year was a little bit funky, dealing with the hand thing. The offensive line was really bad. That being said, he took a ton of sacks. He was 20th in EPA. Again, we talked about the pressure stuff. He had 20 more pressures against than any other quarterback in the league, so he was dealing with stuff all the time. 13 interceptions last year. Again, the playoff game, there were guys on top of him, and I get that, but he missed throws, he missed guys, he missed reads, he did not play well, and at some stage in those scenarios, he's going to have to play well. So, we will see. 15th in completion rate, 13th in success rate, 16th in touchdown to interception ratio. So there are some downsides there, and there were last year. Again, last year he played more like an average quarterback than like a, top 7 or 8, which a lot of people have him. So he's going to have to make a step up, and you hope that the new coordinator in Mike McDaniel kind of gets that going. You hope the offensive line is in a good place, which we'll talk about. But until, he's not going to get that talk of him being just overrated is not going to disappear anywhere. Particularly if he has another year like he did last year, he has to be a little bit better in the pocket. He has to be a little bit more accurate this year and less interceptions, of course. And again, he just has to go into a playoff game and play well. It's different. If you're not playing particularly well sometimes here and there, but eventually you just get that label that Dak has. And I think Dak's a really good quarterback. I think Justin Herbert's a really good quarterback. But they're also probably not going to stop talking about you on First Take until you kind of win that stuff. So again, I think he's a really good quarterback, very talented. We'll see what the new offensive scheme looks like for him. We'll see if they can add to the run game. We'll see if they can help on the offensive line. So let's talk about the skill position group, the guys he'll be throwing to, the guys who will be running for him. And again, before we jump into that, I suppose we can look at the backups. Trey Lance has turned into a solid backup and probably should be at least fighting for a starting job somewhere else, but here he is behind Justin Herbert, DJ Uiagalelei further down the line there. But Trey Lance could, if Trey Lance had to come in and win 2 or 3 games against some of the easier opponents in the NFL, I have no doubt that in this offense, Trey can do that. So capable backups there. But let's talk about the skill position group. Wide receiver, Ladd McConkey took a bit of a step back last year. He's a bit limited, and probably when the other team's number 1, when they have a sticky 1 is on there, you're not going to get a ton out of Ladd. But this is a good system for him, and he's the type of receiver that you would expect. I'm not calling him a Tyreek Hill or a Jalen Waddle or anything, or at least a Tyreek Hill. He's not going to be that, but this is the kind of system, this is the kind of receiver that Mike McDaniel likes. So I think there's a world where he could have a pretty big bounce back year. Quentin Johnson, we all know his issues. Again, he's got some drop problems, but everything else is pretty good. Good route runner, crazy quick. So, man, if he could just stop the drops or just lower them, he could turn into a pretty good receiver. Trey Harris, who was okay in his first year, bit more slow, but another year under his belt. We'll see. Brennan Thompson, the rookie, and then we kind of go further down the list here. Keandre Lambert-Smith, Darius Davis, DeLavion Campbell. Not guys you want to see on the field a ton, but again, I think this could be a pretty decent 3 or 4 if Brennan Thompson does well. Again, further down the line is not really, you don't want a ton of snaps there, but there's a world where, Johnston and Ladd really, really thrive in this kind of system. I think they're both built for this kind of system, so we'll see. Running back, Omarion Hampton, his second year in the NFL here. This is the group you're kind of going to be focused on because Mike McDaniel loves to elevate the run game, and he gets some unique stuff, and the running backs get some good touches. Not sure if he's an Achane type, and I think he's slightly overrated coming into the year. But if he can get out in space and he can do good things in space, he's going to have a good year, and it's as simple as that. Kamani Vidal here as well. Solid backup. Keaton Mitchell, again, as I said, they paid him a bit of money, and the preseason stuff makes it seem like Keaton Mitchell might be the 2 here. Again, I think he's really talented, and we'll see what that looks like, but you get 3 running backs here who are all probably useful in a game. Jarrett Patterson further down the list, so I think you could get some good work out of this running back room. And again, I think the message going around is that we're playing the hot hand, and we'll see what that looks like. I think that could very, very well be the case because, again, I think there's some talent deeper down the line, and I don't know about Omarion Hampton yet. I don't know what he looks like in some of these systems that can get him into space, get him catching the ball, get him one-on-one with guys. So we'll see what that looks like. We'll probably find out over the first 2 or 3 games pretty quickly how the coordinators and the coaches kind of work through the volume there. But this is the room you got to focus on. This is the room that's going to be the ones taking the production step, most likely, assuming the offensive line's all right. And then we have tight end group here. Gatson had a really good year last year. Hope he can, continue growing, moving in the right direction. And Njoku comes in, who's a really solid tight end. You got 2 ones here, pretty much. Charlie Kolar is a really good player as well, a decent blocker. You're going to get some work out of him. And again, in terms of receiving stuff, you're not going to get... Mike McDaniel doesn't necessarily love using tight ends, but if you can get some athletes out on the field, if you can get some good pass catchers out there, if you can block pretty well, then I imagine this is probably a little bit more different than Miami, and we can get some tight end work here as we go. But it's a pretty good room for what it is. I just don't know how much Mike McDaniel is going to be using the tight ends as we go into it. So we'll see. It's an okay set of skill guys. We'll have to wait and see if they make jumps in this system or not. Offensive line. This is interesting. Again, the whole thing last year with Slater and Joe Alt going out and everybody was hurt and it was a really, really bad unit. This year it needed to be a better unit, and they bring in Tyler Biadasz at center. Above average last year, 11th in PFF's rankings, so it was solid, not great piece. At center, pass block stuff was pretty good. That being said, he's hurt now, and the way they're kind of going about it, because there's no real update on that, my assumption is that it looked like to me like a tackle that would make him miss the year. If that's the case, that is a pretty significant problem here, and Joe Slaughter is going to have to step in and play center. Again, he was drafted 2nd round, solid piece. We hope that the Biadasz injury isn't that, because it looked like Slaughter was gonna win the left guard spot, but he can't now. He has to play center, and that's a more natural position there, but you want good linemen on the field. So hopefully Biadasz is like a sprain or a hyperextension or something that gets him back sooner rather than later. Just not in love with the way they're going about it, so We'll see, but that's a pretty big blow to start the year. But again, Joe Slaughter, they drafted him high and they thought he could be useful here, and he's going to have to show his use right from the jump. The rest of the interior, not great. Cole Strange, Coyote, Awosika, I think is how you say that. We'll see. Coyote hasn't really put good tape together, period, in like a while. He had a decent rookie season. It's been 3 or 4 years since then. And his career has gone mostly poorly. Cole Strange, another one who hasn't really played super well. 57th on PFF among guards last year, and they're only 64 starters, man. So I don't particularly like the guard room here, and unfortunately for Slaughter, he could be pretty decent, which may be the case. Either way, he's a rookie coming in. He's going to be next to two not so good players, and that might not help. Sometimes you're a little bit better when you're playing against guys, or when you're playing next to guys who are really good. So we'll see, but not in love with where the spot he's going to go going into. Joe Alt has been really good since he came into the league. Really good player. Played at a high level last year before his injury. Coming off a pretty big injury though. So we'll hope that he comes back fine. He looks like he's going to be just fine going into the season. We'll see if the play is there. Rashawn Slater, who has been excellent in his season so far. He was really great in his last full season. Missed all of last year. Second in PFF's tackle rankings. He's coming back from a big injury. It seems that there's something genuinely lingering there, and that could be a pretty significant worry going into the season. Again, he's missing practices. There's something there. And again, he's coming off a year-long injury here. And the way the offensive line is set up, you can't really afford this. Like, if Slater were to miss time, Joe Alt probably just moves to the other side, and we're looking at like Trey Pipkins tackle on top of two really not so good guards and a rookie at center. Like, all of a sudden we're dealing with what we were dealing with last year with this offensive line, and that's not completely out of the question with the way this is. Again, Biadash, we don't know what his injury is yet, but if it comes back that he's missing the year and Slater's just not healthy, which isn't far-fetched with the way the preseason's gone, all of a sudden we're kind of just dealing with a really bad offensive line on a team that wants to run the ball a lot, and a quarterback who kind of didn't deal with that amount of pressure super well last year. So this could be a bit of an issue. We're going to see what it looks like, but this could be really problematic as the year goes on, and we'll see. Hopefully they're healthy. Again, the best player, Joe Alt, or the best player is Rashawn Slater dealing with issues. Second best player is Joe Alt and he's really good. Again, another one coming off a pretty significant injury. So all of a sudden, this is not in a great spot. And the depth here, again, Trevor Penning's grades have been really horrific since he's joined the league. Trey Pipkins, again, is not a guy you kind of want out there playing tackle. They've both been around a little bit, but not good. And then the rest is like rookies, man. Burke, Taylor, Harkey, they're all kind of deeper down the line rookies that you don't necessarily want right now, and you're hoping to kind of push into growth. There's, again, man, how out of left field is it that this offensive line is Joe Alt and then a rookie at center and Pipkins at right guard, and then like a couple more, or Pipkins at right tackle, and then a couple more rookies at guard, like deeper rookies? Like, that's not wildly out of the question, which is a pretty significant worry. So yeah, hopefully Slater's good. Slater needs to come in and play 17 games of healthy, good football. Otherwise, this could become a bit of an issue. So for the entire offense, it's all about this unit here, because we really like Justin Herbert. or I do at least. I think he's a really good quarterback. I like some of the pieces, but a lot of the offense revolves around this offensive line. Mike McDaniel is a good play caller. I am confident in that. He does a lot of running, and all of a sudden, this offensive line could be a bit of a mess, and all of a sudden Herbert's taking sacks and the run game's not really working as you would like it, and you got a couple of extra, longer third downs, and they're not protecting super well, and you don't want it to come to that, but it's really not far off. So hopefully McDaniel can scheme around some of the potential problems here. And then again, there's a really good outcome where McDaniels can do that, and you get a really good year out of Hampton, and Joe All and Slater are both healthy for the year. And, the center comes in and he's solid from the jump as a second round rookie. So if in that case, you're looking at a pretty good offense, would be my guess. But also the downside again is there. So we're going to see what that looks like. It's tough for me to kind of make a real solid prediction until I see what Slater looks like and until I see what the center looks like. Onto the defense. Again, last year, Jesse Minter was the guy. Play calling here, he moves on. Chris O'Leary comes in, and we'll see if he can replicate that. Again, the system's probably going to be pretty similar, and that's good because these players thrived in that system, and I thought the system elevated some of these guys to a point where they're better than they're better as a group than they are as individuals. So hopefully that's kind of what we're getting going on into the new year. We'll see. But there is some talent here. We can start with the defensive line. This is a pretty good unit. Relatively deep. We can start on the interior. I'm not sure if anybody in this unit is necessarily like incredibly good. I think there's a lot of good and solid, and I think they're relatively deep. But as a unit, I'm not sure if there's any incredible players here outside of Khalil Mack when he's playing at a really high level, but he's getting a little bit older now, so we'll see. But on the interior, they add Dalvin Tomlinson, which is an upgrade to the group. Good run defender, good tackle overall. One of the few players on the Cardinals last year who I thought was good, just in general. He's getting up there in age a little bit, so we'll see if he can just kind of keep that play running. But a good piece to add. Tyler Tart will line up next to him. He was good last year. And he's had two and a half good years in a row now. 26th ranked interior defensive lineman on PFF last year. Kind of want him to keep that level of play. The depth here is okay in terms of what we want to see here. And again, last year, Jamari Caldwell was solid in his snaps and can play starter minutes and could be in starter packages here. Nick Barrett, younger fella, rookie. We'll see what he looks like. Justin, I'm going to mess this up, Ibogbe. Another player who can rotate and be comfortable. So I don't hate the deep, I don't hate this as you kind of go into it. If Nick Barrett can be useful, you're looking at a pretty decent depth set here on the interior. On the edge group, again, this is solid and again pretty deep. Tuli Pelotu, I believe. He's a pretty good pass rusher. He's a little bit overrated because I think he ended up with a high end sack output for what his actual pass rush stuff is, but it's still pretty good. Again, 26th on PFF for pass rush, who do good pass rush numbers. So we'll see what that looks like. Can do a little bit more in the run game, but he's still very young, so hopefully he can continue growing and maybe theoretically take a step forward as well. You bring in a new draft pick and Akeem Mesidor. This is the guy in the draft who should hit the ground running. He's a little bit older than some of the other, his draft class. So he should have a NFL body. He should be ready to go. at this stage. So hopefully he can hit the ground running. He had a really fun year at Miami. Khalil Mack is here, and he missed some time, but was really good in his snaps. Again, he is ageless, it feels like. But again, the age is still there. He is getting a little bit older, so when there's a dip, there will be a dip, but hopefully it just doesn't come this year. We'll see. Bud Dupree hasn't played well in a bit, but a nice veteran presence. And, when you got a young guy there, that's all what you're looking for. And, from a rotational standpoint, hopefully he can come in and get, just a few game breaking plays and kind of go from there, a sack here and there or something like that. But a decent rotational piece, but again, hasn't played super great. But the depth here, again, isn't that bad. You're not the knockoff here. If a Mesidor is fine and hits the ground running, then the depth here is really not too bad. So a pretty decent unit there. Linebacker, it's a decent room. Diane Henley last year took a bit of a step back. His first 2 years were really good, and he looked like he was growing into something really great. And again, last year took a step back. The run defense stuff wasn't there. The coverage stuff wasn't there. So that's not great, and you hope he can kind of just get back to who he was his first 2 years in the NFL. Denzel Perryman, starting for now, good in run defense, not a great in coverage. So we'll see if there's like a hole in coverage here, because this has been a good coverage unit for the most part, and you don't want two linebackers in the middle who can't cover. So Henley hopefully can kind of get there, but the run defense stuff again is really good and continues to be really good. Troy Dye, nice depth piece for sure. I can see him being the starter at some stage over Perryman, and again, Perryman's gonna probably he's missed some time, so Dye is gonna get his fair share of snaps. You're getting a pretty good run stuff platform as well. If he can bring his coverage up, then he would just be a better option than Perryman, period, in the middle of that defense. So three decent players you got across the front. After that, probably not exactly kind of what you want. Delshon Phillips, not very good. Junior Colson just never really got it in the NFL, despite what looked like some pretty decent tape out of Michigan. So don't want to lose too many guys, and Perriman's one of those guys who misses time relatively often. So hopefully Troy Dye can stay healthy. Hopefully Henley can stay healthy and take a step. And again, it's a pretty decent linebacker unit. Nothing overly spectacular, but there's room for growth for sure. And off we go to the secondary, and we can start with Derwin James here, who's going to play nickel, but he does a whole lot of things. And we're going to start with Derwin James because, again, he played 40% of his snaps last year at linebacker. A little bit small for some of the run defense stuff, but in terms of covering as a linebacker, you're not going to find too much better. He can cover in the secondary. He can cover at linebacker. He can blitz. He could hit. He can do pretty much anything you need him to do. Derwin James is a really fantastic player and an all-tool guy. He's slated at nickel, but again, 40% of his snaps last year at linebacker, played some safety, all that stuff. He's going to play all over the place. And when he does come out of nickel, they just bring in Dante Jackson, who, again, last year was really good in those snaps. And he can be a rotational piece, and he can line up at nickel and just be a good nickel corner in his rotational snaps, man. And that's such a nice thing to bring in and be able to bring in, because one, he can stay fresh. Two, you're not losing a ton when you put him in there compared to Derwin James. If it was compared to last year, and you can move Derwin James all over the place and you still get some pretty good coverage stuff in the secondary. A really, really nice piece to have. 24th rated corner in coverage last year. So again, can stay healthy, can come in and give you good corner snaps. If you can just if he could repeat last year, they'll be in a good place in this secondary. Tarheeb Still was solid last year as well. 33rd rated corner, still young. Hopefully he can take another step, because again, he's got a pretty good base there, and you're looking at some other pieces across the way that are good. You get good play at safety. You get good play, in some other spots, linebacker, corner. So hopefully he can take a step there. Cam Hart, he's all right, nothing crazy. We'll see what that looks like kind of coming into the year. He's probably the weak link here. Tony Jefferson at safety, solid piece. Not much more you can say there. 24th on PFF last year. The coverage stuff was really good. Hopefully that can stay there and continue going. Elijah Molden didn't play particularly well last year, but this is a guy who's had a pretty up and down career. He's had some good safety, or he's had some good years, he's had some bad years. Hopefully this year we can get a good year out of him. RJ Mickens at depth piece was solid in his snaps last year. You got Genesis Smith in there as a rookie, so the safety room could be solid. The corner room is good, but the depth is a little bit funky. Dean Leonard, Nico Reed, limited snaps on defense, so while you have a good fourth, it might get a little bit funky if somebody on the top line were to get hurt. So this should be a good secondary. Again, there's a piece or two in there that you might be able to get at, but if the pass rush is the pass rush, and continues to be what it was, then it doesn't pop out, it doesn't stick out as much as normal. So as a defense overall, again, I think the coverage unit's pretty good. Linebacker room is pretty good. The defensive line is all pretty good. I think this is a pretty good defense, a top 10-ish unit. If Chris O'Leary can come in and just kind of keep feeding along what Jesse Minter was doing and just building on that, then you're probably just going to get another top 10-ish defense, and that's pretty good. So we'll see about that, and we'll look at the schedule, and we'll see where some of these kind of line up. But again, you're looking at a pretty decent football team and a decent amount of spots, and you're also looking at a football team that could fall down in a couple of spots if things don't particularly go right. So they start the year with 2 winnable games at home, Arizona at home and then Las Vegas at home. You should be winning those. And then they go on like an 8 or 9 game stretch here. That's got to be one of the worst in the NFL. After those 2 home games, you go at Buffalo, at Seattle, Denver at home, at Kansas City, and then you get a bye week. And then after the bye week, at the Rams, home to Houston, at Baltimore. Like, that is a nasty 8-week stretch, 7 games, 8 weeks with the bye in there. There aren't too many teams in the NFL getting stretches like that. That is truly, truly, really difficult. And particularly because it happens pretty early, and if Slater's not ready to go until like the bye week or something like that, or Biadasz isn't back until after the bye week if he comes back at all, you get Seattle in there, you get Denver in there. It's pretty nasty. Then you got to play Josh Allen on the road. It's a pretty nasty stretch. And then again, after the bye, the 3 Super Bowl contenders with the Rams away from home. Well, not away from home. They're both playing they both play in the same stadium, but it's pretty much a road game anyway. In terms of what the crowd will be. And then Houston, Elite D, Baltimore, Lamar Jackson. It's a nasty, nasty, nasty turn there. Then you get the Jets at home. That's probably, we lay whatever number they're favorite by. Like, this is the game they're going to kill someone in after that crazy stretch. And then it doesn't get better, and you get New England at home and then at Tampa Bay. So the team that beat you last year in the playoffs, and then you go to Tampa Bay, who's probably not going to be a pushover. And then at Las Vegas, home to the Niners, who can be very good on their day, at Miami, and then 2 division games, Kansas City, and then at Denver to end the year. It's a really nasty schedule. There are wins on it. Like, again, you should win your first 2. You should beat the Jets. You get Miami in there. You get 2 games against Las Vegas. Like, you should and got to win those the way this schedule's set up. But it's nasty, man. Like, this is one of those things where you could be a better team than last year and be worse when it comes to the record. And because of the way the AFC's set up, you got to win some of those games, because 9-8 probably doesn't get you in. There are a lot of good quarterbacks in the AFC. There are a lot of good football teams. You get New England, Buffalo. You get everybody in the North that isn't the Browns. You get the Chiefs, you get the Broncos, you're getting the Texans, maybe the Jaguars, maybe the Colts if Daniel Jones comes in healthy and they just pick up where they left off before his injury. There are teams there who are ready to roll, and 9-8 may not do it, and the schedule might just dictate that happens. So we don't have any over under stuff because I think the team's pretty good, and the schedule prevents me from kind of doing any overs there, and I don't want to do any unders because I like so much about what's here. I like Justin Herbert, I like Mike McDaniel. I like the defense in pretty good chunks or in pretty big chunks. So we didn't do any over under stuff. We did a prop here. Ladd McConkey over 900.5 receiving yards at plus 115, a $10 bet for us in our challenge. I think this could be a bounce back year for McConkey, and not because of anything I saw last year. Again, last year he went for, I think he played 16 games and went for like 700 and what was it, 5758, I think it was, if I remember it right, 789, 6 touchdowns, 66 receptions. I think that goes up a little bit this year. I think this is, again, Mike McDaniel's not a dude who loves tight ends. They're going to run the ball a lot, but he does like these short passes, those get off stuff, and I think that really, really works out for Ladd. And I don't think they're going to use him as deep down the field like they're going to do with Quentin Johnston. So I think if the offensive line is kind of falling apart a little bit, then he might just become the check down guy, and he might just be picking up yards, little, 8 here, 7 there, 6 here, 8 here, like a lot more often than he was last year. And again, 66 receptions on 106 targets. And the offensive line's a little bit better, then he probably just gets over it because Herbert has time. If not, then he's probably just getting that amount of targets anyway because he's getting some of these dump off pieces. So I like a bounce back here for Ladd McConkey. I think he gets over the 900 yard mark. I think in a really, really good year, he could get toward 1100. Again, he got 1149 in his first year, and I'm not counting on Ladd McConkey becoming necessarily a better receiver. I do think he's a little bit limited in some of the stuff he does. Again, particularly if the number one corner is just kind of shadowing him, and it's a really good corner, like Christian Gonzalez is like a corner that's just going to eat up Ladd McConkey. But going through the schedule, there are some spots where you could really see him just dominating. And again, like Arizona, Las Vegas, you have to play twice. The Jets, there are some secondaries here that you can get at. Tampa Bay, I think you can get at. Miami, for sure, you can get at. And then as we go along, I think there are teams who aren't that good defensively. Buffalo, I think you can kind of get at defensively. And there's a world where like a New England's kind of hurt, but and Christian has to kind of mark maybe Johnston a little bit further down the field and he gets some work. And San Francisco doesn't have good secondary. Like, I think there are a lot of teams here or a lot of places here where the Chargers offense can kind of go up and down. And I think there's a world where McConkey kind of has a big year because of, one, the teams they're playing, and two, how involved he is in the offense. So there we are. The Los Angeles Chargers, that's all of them, and that's all of it. And we'll see how their year goes. It's a really nasty schedule, but hopefully the offense takes a step forward and the defense continues to be good, and they'll be in it throughout the year.